The four of them had been inseparable since their freshman year. Alex, with his bright red hair and an old Nikon D80 he'd inherited from his father, was the group's designated documentarian. He believed every story, no matter how small, deserved to be preserved. Sarah, the pragmatic one, was their walking itinerary, a meticulously organized planner who always had a backup map and a first aid kit. Jack, the perpetual joker, was the life of the party, his infectious laugh echoing through the campus hallways and now, the forest. And Emily, the quiet observer, had an uncanny ability to notice things others missed. A broken twig, a disturbed patch of moss, a shadow that didn't quite belong. They were four university students on a simple mission, a weekend hiking trip to the Kızıltepe Mountain. The air was crisp and clean, a welcome change from the city's polluted haze. The trail they followed wound through a thick canopy of pine trees, their needles blanketing the ground in a soft, brown carpet. Sunlight filtered through the branches in dappled patterns, painting a mosaic on the forest floor. Jack was in the lead, his voice a steady stream of jokes and anecdotes about past adventures. "I swear, Alex, if you get another shot of a squirrel for your Nature's Majesty series, I'm going to put that camera in the river myself," he quipped, turning to wink at Emily. She smiled faintly, her eyes scanning the dense undergrowth. As the afternoon wore on, they reached a small clearing with a gently flowing stream. It was the perfect spot for a break. As they unpacked their sandwiches and bottles of water, Jack pointed across the stream to a series of stones arranged in an unnatural circle. They looked old, covered in moss, but their placement was deliberate. "Looks like a scene from one of those horror movies, doesn't it?" he said, his voice a little too loud. "Probably a summoning circle." Alex scoffed, taking a picture of the arrangement. "It's probably just some kids trying to be spooky," he said, but Emily didn't look convinced. She stared at the stones, a deep sense of unease settling in her stomach. There was something ancient and heavy about them, a feeling that had nothing to do with playful pranks. She felt a familiar prickling sensation on the back of her neck. The hike continued, but the playful atmosphere had begun to shift. The sun was setting, casting long, eerie shadows through the trees. The trail became steeper and more winding, the trees thicker and more oppressive. They were no longer following the well-worn path. Sarah checked her compass, but the needle was spinning wildly. "This is not right," she muttered, tapping the compass face. "There's too much magnetic interference." Alex, ever the photographer, began to film their surroundings. His camera captured their worried faces, the blurring trees, and the increasingly darkening sky. As dusk deepened into twilight, the first sign of real trouble appeared. Alex's camera, which had been working perfectly all day, suddenly shut down. The screen went black, and no amount of button pushing could bring it back to life. A profound silence descended upon the group. The chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, the faint murmur of the wind, all of it ceased. The forest had become a tomb. Emily was the first to hear it. A high-pitched, guttural scream that was cut short, as if a hand had been clamped over a mouth. It was not a human sound. Jack tried to make a joke, but the words died in his throat. Then, the sounds began. A cacophony of snarls, hisses, and whispers that seemed to come from all directions at once. The group huddled together, their flashlights dancing nervously across the trees, illuminating nothing but the shadows. That night, the camp they had intended to set up was never made. Their last moments were a frantic, terrified sprint through the darkness, a desperate attempt to outrun a terror they could not see. The sounds of their own frantic breathing, the snapping of twigs under their feet, and the sinister laughter that followed them through the woods was their final symphony. By the time morning broke, the camp was deserted. Search parties found only two things. Alex's broken camera, lying in a pile of leaves, its lens cracked and its memory card missing. And Emily's compass, lying next to a small pool of dried blood. The glass was shattered, and the needle, now frozen, pointed not north, but straight down into the earth. The mountain had claimed its victims, and the only clues left behind were a broken camera and a compass with a secret it would never tell. The disappearance of the four students sparked a massive search and rescue operation. Helicopters with infrared cameras scoured the mountain from above, while dozens of volunteers and trained rescue personnel combed the dense forest below. The story was a local sensation, then a national one, as their faces, four bright, hopeful college students, graced the front pages of newspapers and the screens of television news. Their families, clinging to hope, set up a command center at the base of the mountain, poring over old maps and trail guides, desperately searching for a clue they might have missed. But the mountain, it seemed, had swallowed them whole. The search continued for weeks, then months, but not a single trace of the students was ever found. No backpacks, no camping gear, no articles of clothing. It was as if they had simply ceased to exist. The only things left were the two artifacts found by the initial rescue party: the camera and the compass. Alex's camera, despite its broken lens, was carefully examined by police technicians. The memory card was, as the initial report had stated, missing. But the camera's internal storage revealed a brief, corrupted video file. A technician managed to recover a few seconds of blurry, static-filled footage. It showed a rapid succession of images, the four students huddled together in terror, their faces illuminated by the frantic beam of a flashlight. The final frames were a chaotic blur of green and brown, the camera seemingly dropped and rolling through the undergrowth, before a final, haunting image, a wide, pale shape with two dark, hollow spots, blinking slowly in the darkness. The image was too distorted to be identified, but the terror in the students' eyes was unmistakable. The police dismissed the footage as a hoax or a result of the camera's malfunction, a conclusion that brought little comfort to the grieving families. Emily's compass was an even greater mystery. Its needle, frozen in place, pointed directly towards the ground. Scientists and experts from a nearby university were brought in to examine it. They theorized that the compass had been exposed to an incredibly strong magnetic field, one that would have been powerful enough to snap the needle's alignment and fuse it in place. But they couldn't explain what could have caused such a phenomenon in the middle of a remote mountain range. The dried blood on its shattered glass was tested and confirmed to be human, though it was so degraded that a positive DNA match was impossible. The official report concluded that the students had simply become disoriented in the woods and fallen, and that the compass was just a tragic coincidence. But for the families, the story was not so simple. They knew their children, and they knew that their careful planning and extensive training would not have led to such a careless mistake. Emily's father, an old mountaineer himself, insisted the compass was a message. He spent years returning to Kızıltepe, tirelessly searching for the spot where the compass had been found. He used special equipment to detect magnetic anomalies, but found nothing. He died a broken man, convinced that his daughter's final message had been a plea that he could never understand. The mountain, they said, had a dark history. Old local legends told of a malevolent spirit, a shadow that lived beneath the earth, luring travelers to their doom. The villagers had always warned hikers to stay away from the cursed peak. But the students, like so many others, had laughed it off as a silly superstition. Now, their laughter was gone, and the mountain's secret remained buried, a silent testament to a truth too terrifying for a compass to point to, or for a camera to truly capture. A decade passed. The Kızıltepe Mountain mystery, as it came to be known, faded from the national spotlight. It became a cold case, a chilling footnote in the annals of missing persons. Detective Marcus Thorne, a grizzled, world-weary veteran of the city's homicide division, had been one of the first responders on the initial search. The case had haunted him ever since. He was the one who had handled the compass, who had seen the frozen needle and the smear of blood. He never believed the official report. The compass was a message, he was sure of it. Emily's father's conviction had resonated with him, a shared sense of frustration with a truth that was just out of reach. Thorne, now retired, spent his days poring over the old case files, the grainy photographs, and the corrupted video footage. He had a small cabin at the foot of Kızıltepe, a constant reminder of the failure that defined the end of his career. He often felt a strange pull from the mountain, a silent whisper on the wind, calling him back. One rainy afternoon, as he was cleaning out his old detective kit, he found a small, unmarked cassette tape. He had forgotten about it entirely. It was a recording he'd made of the radio chatter on the day the students were first reported missing. He put it into an old tape player and listened. The static-filled voices of the search parties, the frantic reports, the confused commands, it was all there. But in the background, beneath the static and the voices, was a faint, rhythmic clicking sound. It was the sound of a Geiger counter. He remembered now. A volunteer, a geology student, had been using one to search for mineral deposits and had reported an anomaly near the stream where the students had last been seen. The report had been dismissed as irrelevant. Thorne, his heart pounding in his chest, grabbed his own old, rusted Geiger counter and a battered copy of his old case files. He knew where the trail was. He knew where the stream was. He was going back to the mountain, not as a detective, but as a ghost chasing a ghost. The old trail was overgrown, reclaimed by the wild. Thorne pushed through the thick brush, the Geiger counter swinging from his hand, its needle twitching erratically. As he neared the stream, the clicking grew louder, more frantic. He found the stones that Jack had joked about, now almost entirely consumed by moss. The clicking was deafening here. It wasn't a summoning circle, he realized. It was a marker. A marker for something buried deep beneath the earth. He used a small shovel to dig at the ground, and after only a few minutes, hit something hard. It was not a rock. He dug furiously, the rain plastering his gray hair to his forehead. He unearthed a small, metal box. It was a military-issue ammunition can, rusty and corroded, but still sealed shut. He used a crowbar to pry it open. Inside, nestled among a layer of old, moldy towels, was a small, cylindrical object. It was a lead-lined canister, and on it, scratched with a shaky hand, were 4 words, "The mountain is alive." Inside the canister was the memory card from Alex's camera. And a small, handwritten note from Emily. The note was a desperate, panicked scrawl. "The compass points down. The stones are a warning. It's not just a legend. It breathes. We saw it. It has eyes. It's beneath us. It wants to be found. It wants us to stay." Thorne stared at the note, his hands trembling. He put the memory card into his laptop. The video footage was no longer corrupted. It was a continuous, horrifying narrative. The students' final minutes, their terrified flight, the moment the camera was dropped. The screen, which had once shown a blurry, pale shape, now showed a clear, horrifying image. A cavernous maw, filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth, emerging from the ground. A pair of large, dark, intelligent eyes blinking in the darkness. The students had stumbled upon a secret, a living, breathing horror that the mountain had kept for centuries. The compass hadn't been broken by a magnetic anomaly. It had been pulled down, into the very earth, by the thing that lived beneath it. Emily hadn't left a message for her father. She had left a warning for anyone who dared to follow. The mountain wasn't just cursed. It was a predator. And the 4 students were its prey. Thorne watched the video on repeat, his mind struggling to process the unadulterated terror it contained. The camera's audio, once muted by static and corruption, was now chillingly clear. He could hear the students' frantic whispers, their gasps of fear, and the sickening, wet sound of something moving through the earth beneath their feet. He saw the ground crack open, saw the terrified faces of Alex, Jack, and Sarah as a maw of teeth emerged from the soil. He saw Emily, her face pale with horror and determination, shove the camera into the ammunition can and throw it towards the river, a final desperate act. The last thing the camera recorded, before being dropped, was Emily's final scream, not of fear, but of defiance. She was not just a victim, she was a witness. Thorne knew he had to act. He couldn't go to the police. They would never believe him. The video, the note, the compass, they would be dismissed as a hoax, the ramblings of a broken, retired detective. He was alone. But he had a purpose now, a clear path laid out by a dead student. The Geiger counter, the stones, the compass, they were a map. A map to a monster. He packed his bag, not with camping gear, but with explosives, ropes, and a high-powered rifle. The mountain had a secret, and he was going to be the one to unearth it. He went back to the stream, the Geiger counter screaming in his hand. He found the exact spot where the compass had been found, the spot where it pointed to the ground. He dug, not for another box, but for the very earth the compass had indicated. He dug for hours, his hands bleeding, the rain washing the dirt from his face. And then, he found it. A small, hidden crack in the earth, barely wide enough for a hand to fit. He shone his flashlight into the darkness. It was a tunnel, not natural, but man-made. It led straight down into the mountain's heart. Thorne rappelled down the tunnel, the Geiger counters clicking a constant, frantic drumbeat. The air grew thick and heavy, filled with a metallic smell. The tunnel opened into a vast, dark cavern. The air was filled with a low, rhythmic hum, a sound that seemed to vibrate in his very bones. He saw it then. A massive, pulsating mass of flesh, embedded in the cavern's floor, its surface covered in the same pale, hollow eyes from the video. It was the mountain's heart, a living, breathing creature that had been feeding on the land and its travelers for centuries. It wasn't a legend. It was a parasite. And the students, their final moments of terror, their bones and flesh, were a part of its eternal meal. Thorne, his hands shaking, raised his rifle. He had come here to finish what 4 students had started. He was here to kill a mountain. But the mountain, with its thousands of blinking eyes, was watching him. It knew he was there. And it was hungry. The final act of the tragedy was about to begin, not in a frantic, terrifying sprint, but in a silent, desperate stand against a horror that had no name.